Welcome to US Coins World. What if I told you that some of the rarest and most valuable US coins might be hiding right under your nose? Today, we're uncovering incredible treasures, coins so rare, they could make you a fortune overnight. Ready to discover hidden history and cash in on some amazing finds? Let's dive in. Top 1 today, we're diving deep into a fascinating piece of American numismatic history, the 1943 United States 5-cent coin, better known as the Jefferson nickel. Now, you might think a nickel from 1943 is just another old coin, but trust me, some of these pieces have stories that can make any collector's heart race. These are coins with history, mystery, and in some cases, jaw-dropping value. First, let's take ourselves back to the year 1943. The world was in the middle of World War II. America was fully mobilized for the war effort, and this had a direct effect on the coins being minted at the time. Nickel, the metal, was a crucial material for manufacturing armor plating, military machinery, and other war supplies. Because of this, the United States Mint made an important change. They removed nickel from the 5-cent coin entirely. Instead, the 1943 Jefferson nickel was made of a special wartime alloy, 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. This change wasn't just a small tweak in composition, it created one of the most unique and historically significant coin issues in U.S. history. On the obverse of this coin, we still have Felix Schlag's timeless portrait of Thomas Jefferson. You'll see the words, "In God We Trust," and "Liberty," along with the date, 1943, to the right. On the reverse, there's the beautiful depiction of Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, with "E Pluribus Unum" above and "United States of America," and 5 cents below. But there's one special visual clue that instantly tells you this is a wartime silver nickel. Above Monticello, right over the dome, there's a large mint mark, either P for Philadelphia, D for Denver, or S for San Francisco. This was the first time in U.S. history that the Philadelphia Mint used a P mint mark on a coin. Now, here's where things get exciting for collectors. Because these nickels were made of silver, they aged differently from standard nickels. The wartime alloy tarnished in unique ways, creating beautiful toning on some coins, shades of blue, gold, violet, and gray. Coins with attractive, natural toning can command much higher prices at auction. But the real stars are the coins that remain in pristine, uncirculated condition, with full luster and no signs of wear. Finding a 1943 nickel like that is rare, and finding one with sharp detail and a perfect strike is even rarer. Let's talk about errors, the magical word in coin collecting. The 1943 silver nickels have some truly fascinating minting mistakes. One of the most famous is the double die, where the design elements, especially the date and lettering, appear doubled due to a misalignment in the die creation process. This is one of the most sought-after errors for this coin. Another highly collectible error is the off-center strike, where part of the design is missing because the coin blank wasn't properly centered when struck. The more dramatic the off-center, the higher the value. There's also the overdate error, for example, a 1943/2 nickel, where a die from 1942 was repurposed and re-engraved for 1943, but traces of the original date remained. This kind of minting quirk sends collectors into a frenzy because it's a combination of history, rarity, and sheer minting oddity, and we can't forget the full steps designation. This refers to the steps on the Monticello building on the reverse. Most coins have these steps partially worn down or not fully struck, but if you can find a 1943 nickel where the steps are complete, sharp, and uninterrupted, known as full steps, you have something truly special. These are the holy grail for Jefferson nickel collectors, and in the 1943 series, they are exceptionally rare. Now here's the best part, this is a coin you can still find if you know where to look. Because these were made of silver, many people saved them over the years, either as war memorabilia or simply because they stood out from regular nickels. You might find them in inherited coin collections, in estate sales, or even sitting forgotten in a jar of change that's been tucked away for decades. Roll hunting, going through rolls of nickels from banks, still occasionally turns up a 1943 silver nickel, and while most will be worth a modest amount, the rare ones in exceptional condition or with significant errors can be worth a fortune. The combination of wartime history, unique composition, and collectible varieties makes the 1943 nickel a true gem in U.S. coinage. It's a reminder of how world events can shape even the smallest parts of daily life, like the change in your pocket. And for collectors, it's a chance to hold a piece of history that's both tangible and beautiful. So what's the big number? How high can the value go? Well, here's the exciting truth. If you have a 1943 United States 5-cent coin in flawless, uncirculated condition, especially one with rare errors like a double die, dramatic off-center strike, overdate variety, or with the coveted full steps, it could be worth as much as $85,000. Yes, you heard that correctly, $85,000 for a single nickel. That's the magic of numismatics, turning what seems like an ordinary coin into a treasure worth more than most cars on the road today. Top 2. We're going to talk about a coin that's often overlooked in pocket change, yet it has the potential to be worth a life-changing amount of cash, the 1971 United States of America 5-cent coin, better known as the Jefferson nickel. On the surface, it looks just like the millions of other nickels minted in the early 1970s. But hidden among these everyday coins are rare treasures that collectors will pay astonishing amounts to own. The year 1971 was an interesting time in American coinage. The Jefferson nickel, designed by Felix Schlag, had already been in circulation for over 3 decades, but subtle variations, minting quirks, and condition differences meant that some coins were far more special than others. By this point, the coin was composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, a durable combination that gave the nickel its distinctive silver-gray appearance. On the obverse side, we still see the left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson with the inscriptions, "In God We Trust," on the left, "Liberty," and the date, 1971, to the right. On the reverse, Monticello, Jefferson's famous home, stands proudly in the center with "E Pluribus Unum" above, and "United States of America" with 5 cents below. The majority of 1971 nickels were minted in 2 locations, Philadelphia, no mint mark, and Denver, marked with a small d on the reverse to the right of Monticello. The Philadelphia mintage was enormous, producing hundreds of millions of coins, while Denver's output was also substantial. Because of this, finding a circulated 1971 nickel isn't difficult, but finding a rare variety or one in pristine, mint state condition is a very different story. What really drives the high value for certain 1971 nickels comes down to 3 main factors: condition, minting errors, and special strike varieties. Let's start with condition. A typical coin that's been through decades of pockets, cash registers, and coin jars will be worn down. The details of Jefferson's hair will be flat, the steps of Monticello will be worn smooth, and the luster will be gone. But if you can find a 1971 nickel that somehow avoided all that circulation, one with sharp details, full mint luster, and absolutely no scratches or wear, you're holding something special. Now, there's a particular designation that collectors chase in Jefferson nickels: full steps. This refers to the steps on the Monticello building on the reverse. To get the full steps designation, all the steps must be sharply struck and completely visible without interruptions. This might sound easy, but in reality, very few nickels from 1971 have full steps because of the way the coins were struck at the time. The dies weren't always fresh and the striking pressure wasn't always strong enough to fully bring out the design. So a 1971 nickel with full steps can command a huge premium, especially in high grades. Next, let's talk about mint errors, and the 1971 nickel has some spectacular ones. One of the most famous is the double die obverse, where the date, lettering, or even parts of Jefferson's profile appear doubled under magnification. Another collectible error is the off-center strike, where the design is shifted toward one side, leaving part of the coin blank. The more off-center it is, while still showing the date, the more valuable it becomes. You might also find clipped planchet errors, where a portion of the coin's edge is missing because the blank was improperly cut, or die cracks, where raised lines appear on the coin due to damage to the minting die. There are also rare proof versions of the 1971 nickel, struck at the San Francisco Mint. These coins were made for collectors and have mirror-like fields with frosted devices. While most proofs are not extremely rare, finding one in perfect, PR70, condition or with unusual minting anomalies can still fetch high prices. Collectors are willing to pay big money for coins that combine multiple desirable traits, high grade, full steps, and a dramatic mint error. That's the ultimate trifecta. A coin like that becomes more than just pocket change, it becomes a numismatic treasure. What makes this so exciting for everyday people is that these coins are still out there. They can be hiding in a jar of old coins in your home, sitting unnoticed in a cash register, or tucked away in an inherited collection. Unlike some rare coins that were minted in tiny numbers, millions of 1,971 nickels exist, but the rarest and most valuable examples are few and far between. It's like a treasure hunt where the prize is hiding in plain sight. So the next time you get change back from a store or go through a pile of old coins, take a close look at those nickels. Check the date. Inspect the Monticello steps. Look for doubling or unusual shapes in the lettering. That little extra attention could be the difference between finding a coin worth 5 cents and finding one worth thousands. And now for the part you've been waiting for, the top-end value. If you have a 1971 United States 5-cent coin in absolutely flawless condition, with the coveted full steps, and perhaps paired with a dramatic mint error, you could be looking at a coin valued as high as $83,000, yes, $83,000 for a coin you could easily mistake for pocket change. That's the magic of coin collecting, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, and uncovering pieces of history that are worth more than you ever imagined. Top 3. We're diving into one of the most famous and widely collected coins in American history, the 1964 United States of America 5-cent coin, better known as the Jefferson nickel. Now you might be thinking, 1964 nickels are everywhere, I've seen them in my change. And you'd be right, but here's the twist. Hidden among the hundreds of millions of ordinary nickels from that year are rare varieties and minting errors that can transform an everyday coin into a valuable treasure worth an astonishing amount of money. Let's set the stage. The year 1964 was a milestone for American coinage. This was the last year the U.S. Mint produced coins with silver in denominations higher than a nickel. The silver quarter, half dollar, and dime were about to change forever. But the nickel itself was not made of silver. Instead, it was composed of the standard 75% copper and 25% nickel alloy that gives it that familiar silvery color. What makes 1964 so special for nickels, however, isn't just the material, it's the sheer mintage numbers and the varieties that emerged that year. In 1964, the United States Mint struck more nickels than ever before, trying to address a nationwide coin shortage. Between the Philadelphia and Denver mints, billions, yes, billions, of nickels were produced. This was also the last year that the date, 1964, would appear for several years in a row, because the mint, trying to ease the shortage, kept striking coins dated 1964 well into 1965. This unusual decision means that there are countless 1964 nickels, but it also created opportunities for subtle differences and striking issues that collectors hunt for to this day. The design, created by Felix Schlag back in 1938, still featured the left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, with "In God We Trust" to the left, Liberty, and the date, 1964, to the right. The reverse proudly displayed Monticello, Jefferson's home, with "E Pluribus Unum" above, Monticello, in the center, and "United States of America" with 5 cents at the bottom. Now, with billions minted, most 1964 nickels are worth face value, unless they are in exceptional condition or have specific errors. And that's where the real magic begins. For Jefferson nickels, one of the most sought-after features is the full steps designation. This refers to the steps leading up to Monticello on the reverse. If all the steps are sharp, complete, and uninterrupted, the coin gets this coveted label from grading services. The problem? In 1964, the quality control wasn't perfect, and many coins left the mint with weak strikes that didn't fully bring out those steps. That means a pristine, uncirculated coin with full steps from 1964 is extremely hard to find, and very valuable, but the story doesn't stop there. 1964 nickels are also famous for dramatic mint errors. One of the most famous is the double die, where parts of the design, like the date, lettering, or even Jefferson's eye, appear doubled when viewed closely. These errors occur when the die used to strike the coins gets misaligned or improperly prepared. Another popular error is the off-center strike, where the design is shifted toward one side, leaving part of the coin blank. These can range from minor shifts to extreme misalignments that make the coin look almost oval. You might also encounter clipped planchets, where part of the coin's edge is missing because the blank metal disc was improperly cut before striking. Then there are die cracks, raised lines or bumps on the coin caused by damage to the die, which can make for fascinating and unique patterns. And let's not forget the rare, transitional errors, where a coin might have been struck on the wrong metal planchet entirely. Imagine a 1964 nickel struck on a silver dime planchet. That's the kind of mistake that turns a common coin into a collector's dream. Proof coins from 1964, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, also deserve attention. These were made for collectors and feature mirror-like fields with frosted details. While many proof coins survive today, finding one in perfect PR70 condition, or one with unusual striking anomalies, can also fetch strong prices. The key to spotting a valuable 1964 nickel is patience and attention to detail. Check the steps of Monticello. Look closely at the date and lettering for signs of doubling. Examine the edges for clipping or unusual thickness. Compare the overall strike quality to other nickels you have. The sharper and cleaner it is, the better. And if you find one that's uncirculated, flawless, and possibly features a rare error, you could be holding a tiny fortune in your hand. What makes the 1964 nickel so exciting is the fact that it's still relatively easy to find in circulation compared to older coins. This means that the potential for discovery is still alive and well. Your next trip to the bank or your next handful of change from the grocery store could be the moment you stumble upon a coin worth far more than 5 cents, and now, the moment you've been waiting for, the top value for this coin. If you have a 1964 United States 5-cent coin in perfect mint state, with the rare full steps designation, and especially if it features a major mint error, you could be looking at a value as high as $81,000, yes, $81,000 for a coin that most people wouldn't think twice about spending. That's the magic of numismatics, the thrill of the hunt, the joy of discovery, and the possibility of turning pocket change into a small fortune. Top 4. We're exploring a coin that many people overlook, yet it hides some surprises that can make it incredibly valuable, the 1984 United States of America 5-cent coin, better known as the Jefferson nickel. At first glance, it's just another nickel from the pocket change of the 1980s. But as you're about to see, some rare varieties and extraordinary minting errors can turn this small piece of metal into a true collector's gem. Let's set the stage for 1984. This was an era when the Jefferson nickel had already been in production for decades. First introduced in 1938, the design by Felix Schlag had become one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. By 1984, millions of these nickels were being struck each year at the Philadelphia and Denver mints. That's part of the challenge. With such a huge supply, only coins with something truly special stand out to collectors. The obverse of the 1984 nickel still carried the dignified profile of Thomas Jefferson, facing left, with "In God We Trust" along the left edge, Liberty, and the year 1984 to the right, and the mint mark just behind Jefferson's ponytail. The reverse showcased the familiar image of Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, with its grand dome and classical columns. But while the design remained the same, 1984 nickels could vary wildly in strike quality, and some received striking mistakes that transformed them from everyday change into numismatic treasures. One of the most sought-after features for Jefferson nickels is the full steps designation. If you look closely at Monticello on the reverse, you'll see steps leading up to the building. In most circulated coins, and even many uncirculated ones, these steps are worn, blurred, or incomplete. But if you find a coin where every single step is sharp, distinct, and fully visible from end to end, that's a full steps coin, and in certain years, especially 1984, they're much harder to find than you might think. This is because the dies used for striking often lost detail quickly, and the mint's high-speed production sometimes left the design slightly mushy. Now, let's talk about errors and varieties, because that's where 1984 nickels can really shine in value. One of the most famous is the doubled die, where certain parts of the design appear doubled due to a misalignment during the die-making process. This doubling can appear in the date, in the word liberty, or even in the steps of Monticello. Another major error to look for is the off-center strike, where the design is shifted away from the center, leaving part of the coin blank. The more dramatic the shift, the more valuable the coin, especially if the date is still fully visible. There's also the broad strike error, where the coin is struck without the collar that normally shapes its edge. This results in a coin that's wider and flatter than normal, with a smooth edge instead of the standard reeded border. And then there are clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank was literally cut off before the design was struck, leaving a crescent-shaped missing section. But perhaps one of the most intriguing errors from the 1980s nickel production is the wrong planchet strike. Imagine finding a 1984 nickel struck on a copper penny planchet, or even on a foreign coin planchet intended for a different denomination. These mistakes are exceptionally rare and always catch the attention of serious collectors. Condition, of course, is everything. A 1984 nickel that's been rattling around in pockets for decades is unlikely to be worth more than 5 cents. But one that's been preserved in pristine, mint-state condition, especially with full steps or a major error, can reach breathtaking prices at auction. Even a small improvement in grade, from MS65 to MS67, can multiply its value many times over. Another point that makes 1984 nickels interesting is that, while not a low mintage year overall, truly high-grade examples are surprisingly scarce. That's because the mid-1980s were not a time when many people were saving rolls of nickels in hopes of future rarity. The result? Most have been heavily circulated, and pristine survivors are far rarer than their mintage numbers might suggest. So, here's the takeaway for every collector and coin enthusiast watching this: never overlook a common-looking coin. Take the time to examine each one carefully. Use a magnifying glass to check for double dies, inspect the steps on Monticello for completeness, and keep an eye out for unusual shapes, sizes, or edges. You just might be holding a small fortune without even realizing it. And now for the moment you've been waiting for. In perfect mint state, with the full steps designation and a dramatic, desirable mint error, a 1984 United States 5-cent coin has been known to sell for as much as $78,000. That's right, $78,000 for a coin that most people wouldn't think twice about spending on a pack of gum. That's the thrill of numismatics, turning pocket change into treasure, finding history in your hand, and keeping alive the stories hidden in every coin. Top 5. We're going to take a journey into the fascinating world of a small but mighty treasure, the 1985 United States of America 5-cent coin, also known as the Jefferson nickel. At first glance, it may seem like an ordinary piece of pocket change from the mid-1980s. But if you think every nickel is worth only 5 cents, you might be missing out on something truly extraordinary. Some of these coins are hiding in plain sight, waiting to surprise collectors with their rarity, condition, and jaw-dropping value. The 1985 Jefferson nickel came at a time when the design by Felix Schlag had already been in use for nearly 5 decades. The obverse, with its dignified portrait of Thomas Jefferson facing left, bears the familiar inscriptions, "In God We Trust," to the left, "Liberty," and the date, 1985, to the right, and the mint mark just beside Jefferson's ponytail. On the reverse, we see the elegant depiction of Monticello, Jefferson's stately Virginia home, with its iconic dome, symmetrical columns, and the words, E pluribus unum, United States of America, and 5 cents. Now, here's what makes 1985 an intriguing year. Although millions of nickels were struck that year, the quality of production varied greatly, and minting errors slipped through that have since become prized finds for collectors. This is where careful observation and knowledge pay off. One of the most desirable features for Jefferson nickels is the full steps designation. This refers to the staircase leading up to Monticello on the reverse. Most 1985 nickels, even fresh from circulation, show only partial or worn steps due to the rapid striking process and aging dies. But if you find one where all 6 steps are sharp, clean, and fully separated from end to end, you've got a full steps nickel, a coin far rarer than the mintage numbers suggest. But full steps alone isn't the whole story. There are mint errors and varieties from 1985 that transform an ordinary nickel into a showpiece. Let's start with the double die variety, where certain elements, such as the date, the word, liberty, or the lettering on the reverse, appear doubled. This happens when the die used to strike the coin is misaligned during its creation. A clear, bold doubling is a sure sign of added value. Next, there are off-center strikes, where the coin's design is shifted noticeably from the center, leaving a blank crescent of metal on one side. The more off-center it is, while still showing the full date, the more a collector is willing to pay. Another dramatic error is the broad strike, which happens when a coin is struck without the collar that normally shapes its rim. This creates a wider, flat-edged coin that's instantly recognizable as different. Then there's the clipped planchet error, where a piece of the blank metal was missing before the coin was struck, leaving a distinct curved or straight-edged bite out of the coin. Perhaps the most exciting, however, are wrong planchet strikes, when a Jefferson nickel is struck on a planchet meant for another denomination or even for a foreign coin. Imagine holding a 1985 nickel that's actually the weight and color of a penny or a dime. That's the kind of rarity that sparks bidding wars at auctions. Now, let's talk about condition. The 1985 nickel was not a low mintage coin, but pristine examples are much scarcer than you might think. Most nickels from that year entered circulation immediately and endured decades of wear, scratches, and nicks. A coin in mint state, untouched, sharp, and with full original luster, is difficult to find, especially with full steps or a striking error. The grading scale plays a huge role here. An average circulated nickel from 1985 may be worth only face value. But as you climb the scale, from MS65 to MS67 and beyond, the price can multiply several times over. Add in the magic words, full steps, and suddenly you've got a coin that stands out from millions of others. For coin lovers, there's a deeper thrill in the hunt. You never know when you might find one of these treasures hiding in a roll of nickels from the bank, in an old jar of change, or even as part of a collection someone overlooked for years. Every coin tells a story, and the 1985 nickel's story is one of survival, rarity, and the beauty of imperfection. So, the lesson here is simple: never underestimate the small change in your hand. Every time you see a Jefferson nickel, especially one from the 1980s, take a moment to check the steps on Monticello, inspect the edges, and look closely for doubling or other unusual features. You could be holding far more than 5 cents, and now, here's the part you've been waiting for: the value. In pristine mint state, with the full steps designation and a major mint error, a 1985 United States 5-cent coin has been known to sell for as much as $75,000. That's right, $75,000 for a coin that most people would toss into their change jar without a second thought. That's the magic of numismatics, turning everyday objects into pieces of history and treasure. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the fascinating world of the 1985 Jefferson nickel, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story about coins worth far more than meets the eye. Until next time, happy collecting, and may your next nickel be the rarest one yet.